Today on Sugar Spun Run, we'll be making cookie dough whoopie pies. Hey Sugar Spun makers, Sam here, and today we are going to be making one of my favorite desserts. These are moist chocolate cookies filled with edible cookie dough. I think you are going to absolutely love them, so let's get started by preheating our oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. You need a really hot oven because these cookies they're more like cakes really, and they bake very quickly. A high temperature is important so that they bake properly and don't spread all over the pan, and your oven is probably going to take a while to get to that temperature, so make sure you start preheating it now. Next, grab yourself a large mixing bowl. In this mixing bowl, we are going to start by adding 1 cup of granulated sugar, followed by 1/3 cup of softened unsalted butter. 1/3 cup is 5 1/3 tablespoons of butter. Your stick of butter should hopefully have a little mark on it telling you exactly where to cut it for 1/3 cup. We are also going to be adding 1 large egg. This should ideally be room temperature. Always risky when you crack an egg right in your mixing bowl. Not advisable. Could be bad, could get shell in there. Do it in a separate dish, don't be like me. Next, for flavoring, you need 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract. Some people say, why do you need to add vanilla when you are making something chocolate? It's because it enhances that chocolate flavor. It is not going to make it taste like vanilla. It's just going to make the cookies or cakes taste better. Now, you're going to want to use an electric mixer for this step, and we're going to beat everything together until it's creamy and it's a pale yellow color and everything is well combined. All right, this was about 30 seconds of mixing on like medium-high speed. Everything's looking pretty good. So now we'll add our buttermilk. Buttermilk is essential for making nice, moist, well-flavored cakes or cookies. I'll get into that in a little bit, depends on what you want to call it. So we're just going to drizzle this in while mixing on low speed. And this is a 1/2 cup of buttermilk, in case I didn't say that already. And ideally it should be room temperature, but I would be lying if I said sometimes I don't forget to pull out the buttermilk and mine might be a little bit chilly. Okay, while you're mixing, you may notice, hey, my mixture is looking a little bit piecey and separated, maybe even a little bit curdled. Don't panic, it's all going to come together in the end. You're doing fine. We're going to set this aside. Now for our dry ingredients, you are going to need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and we're also going to be adding a 1/2 cup of natural cocoa powder. We will also be adding 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and for flavor, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. This is just regular table salt. We're going to whisk everything together, and I always use a bowl that's a little bit too small, so I'm going to do my best to not get this all over my counter or over my shirt because it's chocolate and I wore white today. Let's see if I regret this decision later. Okay, let's bring back our slightly separated wet mixture from earlier. And we have our dry ingredients, but you're also going to need 1 more ingredient to make these cookies, and that is a 1/2 cup of boiling or at least steaming hot water. This was steaming hot a second ago, so I want to move pretty quickly so it stays nice and hot. But we're going to alternate adding the dry ingredients and the hot water to our mixture. I'm going to start by adding about 1/3 of my dry ingredients. I'm going to just use a spatula now to stir everything together until this is mostly combined. You could use your electric mixer on low speed for this, but I just prefer to do it by hand. You could also use a stand mixer for today's recipe if you prefer. All right, once that's been added, we're going to add 1/2 of our water. Hopefully yours is still nice and hot. Hopefully mine is still nice and hot. Stir this in. And we'll add more of our dry ingredients. So now you may be tempted to just use room temperature water or tap water, and I want to tell you, do not do that. Hot water is super important because what it does is it blooms the cocoa powder. So what does that mean? It means it is going to take our cocoa powder from having a flat, chocolatey taste to having a very deep, rich chocolate flavor. So yeah, it'll taste like chocolate if you don't use hot water, but just the difference in the depth of flavor you're going to get because you've bloomed the cocoa and you've used a hot liquid, it's going to make all the difference. Now, instead of hot water, you could use hot coffee. That'll just take things to another level. It won't make your cookies taste like coffee, but it is going to add even more depth of flavor. And I am all about flavor. Okay, last bit of dry ingredients here. Oh my goodness, I could have done a slightly better job whisking. We'll just pretend that didn't happen. Could be worse. And let's add the last bit of our hot water. Mix that in. We do want to have a very well combined batter. It should be smooth and uniform in texture before we start portioning it out and baking it. And look, still nothing on my shirt, so that's a win. Now, anytime you're making a batter like this, there's always the risk that you could overmix your batter and you don't want to do that. But I would say when you're making these cookies, you actually are more likely to run the risk of undermixing it. So make sure you do your due diligence, scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl, and you want to have a smooth, well-combined batter before you continue. Okay, so technically these are cookies, but as you can see, this batter doesn't look much like any cookie batter you've probably made before. This is a lot more like a cake batter, and truly the shells that you're going to be using to sandwich this cookie dough, they really are more like little cakes. They're just baked in cookie shape. So call them what you'd like, but don't be alarmed when your cookie batter looks like this. It's supposed to. You're on the right track. Next, we will grab our baking sheet. I just have a cookie sheet here that I've lined with parchment paper, and I'm going to grab my favorite cookie scoop, my 1.5 tablespoon, and I am just going to scoop level 1.5 tablespoon portions, and I'm going to drop them on my baking sheet. These cookies are going to spread some, so give them a little bit of breathing room on the pan. I say at least 2 inches. I try to drop them straight down because the more rounded they are, the more symmetrical they'll be once they're finished baking, which just makes them look a little bit nicer and makes them easier for sandwiching, because it's easier to match cookies that are symmetrical than it is to match ones that are amoeba shaped, surprisingly. Okay, now these are going over to the center rack of your 450-degree Fahrenheit oven, and they are only going to need to bake for 5 minutes. Now, once they're finished baking, you may notice some cracks on top. The cracks may look like they're hovering on the edge of being underdone. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are, and you do want to take care that you don't overbake these, because if you do, they'll be dry and crumbly, and you want them to be moist and soft, and when you bite into them, they should just be hovering on the edge of fudginess. So don't panic if your cracks look a little bit wet. A toothpick test isn't really ideal for testing that they're done, because most of the time it's going to come out a little bit more moist than you'd like to see in, say, a brownie or a traditional cupcake. So I don't really like to use that here, but you can just sort of tap the edges and they should feel firm. The center is going to sink a little bit if you touch it with your finger, but the edges should at least feel firm. We're going to let these cool completely on the baking sheet, then move them to a cooling rack before we fill them with our cookie dough filling. Now, for the filling, we are going to be using my edible cookie dough recipe with some very slight modifications so that it makes a nice creamier filling for the cookie cakes. This comes together quickly, and of course we're not using eggs, and if any of you have made any of my cookie dough recipes before, you know I am an advocate for heat treating your flour. Perhaps you've heard raw flour has been linked to E. coli, so it's not ideal that you eat it raw. You're supposed to cook it first. I do have a technique for doing this in the oven, but recently I've been a little bit lazy, so I've just been heat treating it in the microwave, which works well. We're going to pop it in the microwave for 30 seconds, give it a stir, take the temperature, and then if it's not at 165 degrees, we're going to continue to heat it in 10-second intervals, stirring and taking the temperature again until we have a temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit at least. Okay, 163. I know I just said 165, but it really only has to be 160 degrees, and I'm not just saying that because it's taking me too long to get to 165. You only need to reach or exceed 160 degrees Fahrenheit. This flour is going to be hot. We do not want to add it to our other ingredients while it's warm, otherwise we will have a greasy mess on our hands because it will melt our butter. We're going to set this aside to cool while we prepare the rest of our edible cookie dough. Now grab yourself a large mixing bowl. And to this, we are going to add 1 cup of softened, unsalted butter. My goodness, my butter is a little extra soft. Yours doesn't have to be quite so melty. In fact, it's probably better if it isn't, but these lights, they really soften that butter quickly. We're also going to add 1 1/4 cups of firmly packed light brown sugar, though if you want to do a blend of light and dark brown sugar, that would also work pretty well. We'll make it a little bit sweeter, a little bit richer. We're also going to add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, because what would chocolate chip cookie dough be without vanilla extract, and a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. Now grab yourself your electric mixer or use your stand mixer and cream everything together until you have a nicely combined cookie dough. Okay, looking good, smelling good. We are almost there. Let's check on our flour. Now mine feels like it has cooled, so I'm ready to start using it. However, let me grab my cookie dough. Once you heat treat your flour, it has this tendency, this really obnoxious tendency to clump a lot. You don't want to add it straight into your batter or your dough, or you're going to have clumpy bits of flour in there. So we are going to sift ours into our cookie dough. Now I'm just going to add this gradually. I'm going to add about 1/3 of the flour right now. I'll just sift this in. Today it seems like it didn't clump that badly, but you can see there are some lumps of flour floating around there in my sifter. I'm just going to use my spoon to force them through, which will break them up nicely. Now I'll use my mixer to stir everything together. Try not to make too much of a mess, but no promises. We'll add some more flour. And then our last bit of flour. All right, let's mix in this last bit. Okay, and if you take a look at the cookie dough right now, this is actually pretty much a perfect cookie dough consistency. So you could technically use this as it is, and this is the consistency that I aim for when I am making just edible cookie dough that I want to eat with a spoon. However, I find it to be a little bit too thick for our soft cookie cakes, so I like to add a little bit of milk. I have 2 tablespoons measured out here, and I'm just going to add this in. We'll stir this in until it's completely combined. It should just need a brief mixing. Okay, let's take a quick look at the consistency. This looks perfect. If it's still a little bit too thick for your liking, stir in another tablespoon of milk. You could also use heavy cream instead, and any kind of milk, non-dairy milk, whatever you have on hand will work well here. Now the last thing we need for our cookie dough is our chocolate chips. You'll want about 1/2 cup of chocolate chips, and personally I like to do a mix of mini chocolate chips and regular sized, and these are semi-sweet chocolate chips. We'll stir these in. Okay, and I'm sorry, I don't know what's changed, but 1/2 cup of chocolate chips just isn't cutting it for me anymore, so we're gonna do a little bit extra. There we go. We're gonna say about 2/3 cups. Getting a little crazy here. All right, we are almost done. All that's left to do is make our cookie sandwiches or our whoopie pies. We're going to complete them, we're going to fill them. So make sure that your cakes are completely cooled, mine are. I'm going to pair them off and just try to make sure that that my tops are well matched. I cannot wait for people to get upset that I just licked my finger on camera. Obviously, you are going to get more cookies than this. I just am not going to make you watch me fill all of them. Now you can pipe the filling in, you can spoon it in. I am going to, again, use my favorite cookie scoop. And I am just going to scoop a nice, healthy portion of cookie dough right in the center there. We'll sandwich this. Oh man, oh yeah, that looks good. Let's fill the rest of them. And that is how you make cookie dough whoopie pies. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this recipe as much as I do. If you try it, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. You have to try this. Oh my gosh.